Students often spend more than half of the school day listening to information and instructions. For those who have difficulties with listening, it can put these students at a disadvantage. Not only can it affect their schoolwork, but it can become a source of stress and frustration. For students who have learning difficulties or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, it can be especially challenging.
The challenges that I face when listening in class is I get distracted. And I get distracted by things sitting in front of me that take my attention off the teacher, like my computer. The challenge that it's creating is I'm not learning the material that's being taught in class. And then that makes me not want to do the work, and therefore I fail.
You've really got to learn to keep positive and keep your mindset on your work. And you have to know that the tips that people give you, especially teachers, if they say, well, maybe you should try this, and try it.
Students who struggle with listening tend to be just disengaged from the classroom. And so that might manifest where they're not doing assignments or they're having a hard time keeping up with the work in class. Sometimes it's just emotional frustration that becomes visible with them. In extreme cases, it can lead to issues with infrequent attendance, and then that kind of snowballs into the student really struggling just with the class as a whole.
As students enter higher grade levels, there's an increased emphasis on listening in the classroom. For students who struggle to listen and pay attention, they can feel overwhelmed with the amount of information that is presented to them verbally.
It is difficult to detect when a student has listening difficulties, particularly if they're very quiet or well-behaved students in the classroom. What a teacher might see is a student who is unsure of how to proceed with a task after the teacher has given the directions, or a student who repeatedly asks the teacher to review the information or the directions one more time. You might see a student, even after the teacher has repeated the directions and reviewed them with the classroom, you might see them looking over, watching what other students are doing. It's not that they don't understand, it's that they didn't really hear it in the first place. The key to working with students who have listening difficulties is finding the way to really focus them and engage them so that they become much more active listeners.
Students with learning difficulties, especially in the listening area, need to be explicitly taught and instructed how to use strategies in the classroom to support that difficulty. Teachers need to model, they need to demonstrate, and they need to reinforce and review these strategies throughout the semester. And the best thing that they can do is make sure that we're using that across subject areas throughout their day.
There are a few key strategies that can help students listen more effectively, including reduce distractions, set the stage for active listening, present new information and instruction in small chunks, plan opportunities for participation and engagement. These are targeted supports for students with learning difficulties and ADHD, but they will be helpful for all students.
For teachers, it's important for them to reduce distractions where possible in the classroom. So closing the door is probably the easiest one that teachers can do. Making sure that students are sitting up front near the board or where instruction is happening. Using nonverbal cues throughout the day, circulating throughout the class will help students who struggle with listening to pay attention. Giving them visual reminders as well on the board will be important. One of the best things teachers can do to set the stage for active listening in the classroom would be to set a clear purpose for that day or for that lesson, and to make sure they're doing it both verbally and visually.
Today we're going to be working with an active reading activity with the book Night. I want to start with just reviewing imagery and symbol with you, and we're going to be using your graphic organizer that we set up in the Google Doc to do that. We're also going to be reading part 2 of Night, and then the last thing that we'll do is once we've read part 2 of Night, you're going to be recording evidence that you may have found as we were reading about the imagery and the symbolism that you see happening so far in the book. Okay? At the end of part 1, what was happening to Ellie and his family? Can anybody remember?
Graphic organizers are a very effective way of helping students become much more active and better listeners in the classroom. For example, there are semantic webs, compare and contrast charts. We can use a KWL. If a teacher gives these graphic organizers to the students at the beginning of a video or even the beginning of a lecture, it can help them to cluster or chunk the information as they're listening to it, which can help them better with recall and retention of information.
So we're going to begin working with that part of the book and in terms of imagery and symbol, okay? What I want to just make clear for you, when we're working in the graphic organizer, I'm asking you to record evidence. Now, we're looking at the meaning of night, okay? That's kind of our focus with our graphic organizer. What idea does night represent in the book? He's called his book Night. That obviously has some kind of meaning. So when you're looking for imagery and symbolism, I want you to find things that you feel you can tie to that, okay?
Other things teachers can do to set the stage for active listening include using cue words and transitional phrases to signal important information and organization, writing key ideas, concepts, and vocabulary on the board, and underlining important words and instructions, and providing the students with different note-taking techniques.
For students with listening difficulties or working memory challenges, presenting information in small chunks is really important. This way students have the opportunity to process the information, they can clarify any questions they have with their teachers before they move on to the next piece of learning.
Having students interact or engage more with the information helps them to become better listeners in the classroom, particularly students with learning disabilities and or ADHD. We can engage them more with the information through activities such as games. We can have them sharing information one-on-one or in small groups. We can have them do role plays. We can have them write the information on the board, do charts. It's really important that we let them be active and not just passive listeners in the classroom.
So what we're going to do for this is I'm going to kind of divide and conquer rather than having everybody work on everything at once. I'll have you working in your table groups on either imagery or symbol. You can do this how you like. If you want to have one person in your group who's going to be the typist in the document, you can do it that way. If you all want to be typing in the document, all 4 of you in your group, you can work that way as well. It's your decision as a group how you'd like to do this. But I do want you to talk to each other, certainly share your ideas. You don't have to sit there and do this by yourself by any means, and I'll be wandering around to help you.
Teachers have an important role to play in recognizing when students might be experiencing listening difficulties and supporting these students with the strategies available.
For teachers, it's really helpful to remember that students who struggle with listening, it's not that they don't want to listen to you or that they don't want to do well in the class, it's that they really struggle with information that's presented to them verbally. And as teachers, we need to think about other ways that we can present and help these students learn.
Students who begin to become more self-aware and are able to, listen and participate and stay focused in class, obviously are much more successful. And if I can help them gain skills in the classroom that they can transfer to life when they're in a job or they're in further school in the future, that are going to help them listen and be engaged, that's really gratifying.
Now I'm finding myself more aware of getting distracted, and when I find myself getting distracted, I'm refocusing myself. And I'm closing my computer and paying more attention to the teacher.
It feels good. It feels really good to know that I'm on top of everything, getting good marks on a test because I know I've been working, I've been studying, I've had teachers help me to study.